Colin, before we get into business, let's start with you. What's your franchise story? How do you fall into the franchise business and the arm that you're in?
Yeah. So I work here at Unsecured Funding Source. UFS is what we'll called for short. And we fund franchisees, new franchisees coming on board with franchisors. And we've been doing it for about 17 years. And we have a little bit of an alternative to SBA that a lot of franchisees have chosen to take advantage of.
So on a day-to-day, what's the volume of franchisees look like that you're working with, and how labor intensive is the process?
Yeah, so there's a few different. It depends upon how labor intensive the process is, depending on the product. We have a couple different products. We actually just launched the Jumpstart loan in Q4 of last year, which was actually designed for franchisees, and that one is a little bit more labor intensive than the average UFS loan. But we're looking at funding in 2 to 3 weeks with minimal or no business plans compared to the SBA loans. What we found was actually that there's this whole gap in funding, kind of between 50,000 and 250,000, 300,000, where SBA loans are SBA lenders are willing to usually go down to about 250, 200,000, and not really below that anymore. Whereas most people can come up with the cash for a franchise, in the 50 to 100,000 range. But once they start to get up in above $100,000 and below that 250, there's what we call the funding gap. And that funding gap is really, they're going to have to access either ROBS, or they're going to have to, access some loans somewhere, somehow. And that's really the gap that we address with the franchisees. So we've funded in the past 17 years, we've funded $500 million in businesses. And so we do a lot. We work with a lot of franchisees day in and day out. That's what we do. And we make up for it in volume compared to where a lot of SBA lenders are going to make up for it in the size of the loans. We make up for it in the number of clients that we service.
Right. So, and I love this topic because I think to a buyer, this is going to be an important part of their buying process. But in general, and right on the site, it says borrow up to $450,000 at rates as low as 8.5%. Let's just take the 450 as an example. How much cash as a franchisee do I need to have to be able to qualify for something like that?
Yeah. So what we do is we focus a lot more on the franchisee's creditworthiness than we do on the cash that they have. And so with the SBA, you're required to have, a certain percent to close, somewhere in that 10 to 20% range, sometimes more. You're supposed to have post-closing liquidity, all that. We don't actually look at that. What we're looking at is we work with the franchisees that are the potential franchisees that are getting ready to make that career transition, right? They're currently employed. They hate their, 9 to 5. They have current income somehow. And what they're looking for is to make that transition. And so we look at current income, and we look at their credit score, their actual, credit worthiness, their credit report. There's a lot of aspects of that credit report that we look at, a lot of different data points to determine how much they are actually able to qualify for. But the rule of thumb is usually somewhere between 2 and 3 times their current income is what they're able to qualify for.
Okay, that's a good barometer. So, out of curiosity, I come to the table, say I want to secure this loan. Do you vet the franchisor, the viability of their franchise business as a part of your process?
It's a great question. So it depends on what product we're talking about. So we have our Jumpstart loan, which is this really, it's the only loan of its kind. It's designed in the 50 to 250,000 range. We worked with a number of franchise brands to actually bring it to market after consulting with franchisees, franchisors, what they're looking for to bring that to market. So that Jumpstart loan is actually, we do look at the FDD. We look at a number of different components in that FDD, but for us, one of the biggest ones is that item 19. Are they fully disclosing, their financials? And it depends on how far down they're drilling down on that item 19, that financial. But we also look at the number of units that are being opened, the number of units that are being sold. There's some viability issues, as we know, sometimes where you sell a whole bunch of franchises and they haven't ever been opened, and then trying to get those the franchisor can sometimes get strapped in capacity on being able to scale that quickly, right? So we do look at those components. And then we also, one of the things that our bank, we're sponsored by a bank, both ourselves and our bank look at is the number of litigations. What are people getting sued in the company? And if so, why? And so those are all components that we look at for our own in-house Jumpstart loan. If we're going on our advisory side, which we do a brokerage model as well, we work with 250 lenders nationwide. We don't normally look at that FDD. We don't normally look at the franchisor. So it depends on if we're taking that risk ourselves and if we feel like it's a great franchisor to work with, or if we're going to, be able to get them funding somewhere else where we're not taking that risk.
I mean, what valuable information back to a franchisee? How often will you deny the loan after reviewing an FDD?
We've done it numerous times, actually. We saved it. This is one of our favorite stories. In about March or April, we had a franchisee come to us. He was looking for the full $250,000 through the Jumpstart program, and there was no item 19. And sometimes there's a viable reason why there's no item 19, right? It depends on the model of the franchise. Some franchises only take, basically a subscription model, right? Where it's, and they don't ever collect data from the franchisees on income. And so they don't have an item 19. Well, that makes sense, right? So what we did was there's no item 19. So we went back to the franchisee. We said, hey, can you please provide us with an item 19 from the franchisor? The franchisor sent over an Excel spreadsheet that was, not a real great Excel spreadsheet. And so we sat down, we looked down, we go, this is not viable. A week later, they made the news as the founder of that franchise getting arrested for wire fraud.
Oh, nice.
So we saved the franchisees $250,000, and so that's one of our favorite stories. But of course, we go through it, and a lot of times it just has to do with what we're looking for. It's nothing bad about the franchisor. It just has to do with our underwriting process, right? That's an extreme circumstance, but it happens fairly frequently. And we're looking for a current FDD. We've had a lot of people try to send us old FDDs.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
Well, I mean, look, I think part of the challenge, and this is all aspects of financing with franchisees. I'll start at a basic. I know plenty of brands that I would say I disagree with this, but they'll qualify you if you have a dime. And that means the franchisee, the true equity or capital that they're bringing to the table is their grit and hustle. And that better be extreme in order for them to win as a franchisee. And then you have more sophisticated franchisors and franchisees. I mean, our recommendation back to a franchise buyer is look at a brand where you can comfortably afford 3 units. Because it's going to be very rare that you build wealth on one. And so when you're looking at an investment, let's say you can, piece together $500,000, then my recommendation is you're actually looking for an investment range of about 150 so that you don't have to open all 3 on day one, but you don't want to feel overwhelmed when you're bleeding cash until you get to the point of profitability on a unit. And so some of these things that we would advise align with probably the way that you look at it too, because you're also in the business of recouping your loan. Like
Exactly.
if you don't recoup it, then there's issues. So on that last statement that I just made on like the way that we would advise a candidate qualify, look for a brand that you can own 3 of these in with the amount of cash and through loans too that you can come to the table with. Would that align with something that you would recommend to a franchisee, or is that counter to how you guys would recommend?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on, and this is a conversation many people aren't willing to have, and I love that you're willing to have it, because this is depends on the franchisee's goals, right? And so, everybody comes to the franchise world with their own goals, right? And for some of them, it's to build net worth. For some of them, it's, I hate my 9 to 5. For some of them, it's that lifestyle, right? So what are we looking for? And that ultimately comes down to it comes down to the answer. I think for some people that are maybe younger, I know some franchisors that are looking for people that are in their 30s, late 20s, right? If it's for somebody that's younger and they're willing to hustle it out for the next few years and continue to build up that profit, as long as there are those profit margins available in one unit, then yeah, I mean, if you're willing to put in the work 50, 60 hours a week for the next couple years and build up that net worth to be able to buy 2 to 3, I agree. If you're somebody that's the average franchisor who's in their 40s, right, late 30s, 40s, yeah, and you're looking at a more accelerated, net worth program, actually getting to the point where you can take time off of your business, I would agree with you. You're going to want to see those 2 to 3 units open, right? Your goal should not be, in my opinion, just to buy a job, right? If you're looking to buy a job, it's fine if it's that's your goal for the next 2 years. But that shouldn't be your long-term goal. And I don't think any franchisor should be looking for franchisees that are looking to buy a job. That's my opinion. I mean,
yeah, obviously if we were to go back 10 years ago, the home service brands don't exist like they do today. And those end up being more job replacement than others. It's like they call it chuck in a truck business. Right. And the scale mind is a little bit different, or the percent of minds that want to scale are a little bit different, because the amount of cash that you have to have saved up to qualify for one of those brands is far less than, say, a brick and mortar business. But yeah, I mean, like we profiled franchisees going back to the start of last year. And every single one of them, if you ask them, why are you doing this? It's for your family. And for your family can mean one of 2 things. It's either I'm doing this to spend more time with them, so I don't care about making a ton of money. I just want to replace enough of my income so that I can, enjoy life around my family. Or it's I want to build wealth, legacy, and something that I can hand off as a multi-generational business. So yeah, I agree on that statement. It's more of what's your objective when it comes to, like, even on that front. I mean, especially in a world where the franchise brokers are cannibalizing many of the candidates and they're leading the witness to the brands that will pay them the highest commissions, not necessarily the right fit. Do you get to intersect in those conversations before they get to that final decision to say, based on that investment, maybe that's not the right fit for you? Or is your job not so much as a consultant as it's the solution?
Yeah. So we don't normally advise people on what best franchise to pick. Right. And part of that has to do with, there's a lot of great as we know, there's a lot of great franchise brokers and consultants out there. And there's a lot of ones that are just going to try to sell people what they want. Right. What's going to pay me the most. Right. And so a lot of because we work, heavily in with a lot of brokers and consultants. And we have found that a lot of the consultants that we work with, they do genuinely care about what the best fit is going to be for the franchise. right? And so we're really just trying to get to the point where we're giving them best solutions for what they have. I mean, most people have never heard about personal loans, or and some of our loans are commercial loans as well. Most people don't even know that's an option for their franchise venture, right? In fact, what we found is a lot of people, they have that cash, right? They're sitting on 150, 200,000, 300,000 investments, cash, whatever it may be, high net worth individuals, and they still understand the concept of using other people's money to invest in their future, right? And if you actually boil it down to just dollars and cents, it still makes more sense. It still makes more sense, pun intended, at a 13 and 14% interest rate to keep your money invested and to borrow that money to get your franchise started than it does to just take your cash. And that's what most people don't realize, right? Is they sit down and they just don't quite understand, those factors. But to me, those are the conversations that we as an industry should be having. Is hey, what matters the most here to a lot of these people. But yeah, like I said, for the most part, we do see a fair amount of our clients coming in, and they're kind of in that process where they've narrowed it down to maybe two or three different franchise brands that they're looking at. And now they just really want to know, how much can I afford? What are my financing options, right?
I mean, I think the big statement that you just said is probably the most critical one, which is we as an industry should educate the buyers or the prospective candidates how this actually works and how to leverage other people's money to help give you the opportunity to build wealth for yourself. And in general, I don't know that us as an industry have done a good enough job of even educating what franchising is. I just talked with a franchisee before I jumped on with you. He came in through the broker network, and I said, all right, truthfully, how much did you understand how the broker network worked? He's like, I had some sort of sense that it's kind of like a real estate agent, that they're going to get a percentage of the franchise fee. I go, but did you know in some cases they're getting 100% of the franchise fee? He goes, nope. And so you take some of this, and I think there's tons of great suppliers for franchising. There are also tons of poor suppliers for franchising. And so to the franchisee, they're novice. They don't understand franchising. They come in here almost blind. And so they got to rely on people like you and I to say, here's the pathway. Here's an unbiased pathway of how you set yourself up for the greatest shot of success. But we have to go through an educational process to get them there.
We do. Yeah. And I think that's part of the beauty of it, is that if we can, get to the point where we're educating people, and that it actually allows people to make the best decisions for themselves. I mean, I have this conversation with people day in and day out. It depends on what your immediate and long-term goals are when it comes to funding. Right. And what and so it is a great conversation that should be had. And there's a lot of great suppliers out there that have those. And it's like you said, there's a lot of people that let's focus on the immediate return, right?
That's right. But if we continue to tell the best stories forward, people are going to figure out their pathway. And frankly, for you guys, and what I want to close with is, what do you want the ghost candidate, someone that watches this, to know about the business? But you guys have a brand. You clearly have done a lot. There are other businesses that are more top of mind, which is part of you guys building up your brand awareness to say, hey, we're a solution here. There's nobody that's saying, here's a database of all the solutions for financing. Maybe there should be. But what do you want a candidate, someone who's out there watching this, to know about you guys, and what is the right time for them to reach out?
Yeah. So I tell people, it's going back to our real estate model, it's always good to know how much house you can afford. And it's always good to know how much business you can afford. Right. Regardless of whether you're choosing to utilize a broker or you're choosing to go out and do a lot of this research yourself. It doesn't matter. What matters is, know what you can afford, know what your financial goals are, and don't be afraid to reach out to don't be afraid to begin to research multiple ways to get funding done. There's a lot of great ways. There's HELOCs, there's ROBS programs, there's SBA loans, and so the best thing you can do as a franchisee is to educate yourself, and not be afraid to make those calls. Figure out how much you can afford, because going back to your earlier point, if your goal is to build wealth, you are going to want to buy 2 and 3. And how do you set yourself up not just to buy the first one, but what are your steps for the second and the third, even if they're 2 and 3 years down the road, right? Because knowing what your game plan is before you make that career transition is going to set you up for success. And the other thing is number one cause of business failure, as we all know, is undercapitalization, right? And so make sure that you understand that you have enough finances lined up so that if you have a rough month 6 through 9, there's a downturn in the economy in year 2. What are your options to be able to get, funding now for that, to plan ahead, and plan your funding ahead, because, once you reach out, once you start that process, the first 2 years are the most difficult times to get funding, right? Once you've already started. And so that's what I try to tell people is, hey, start planning, make your plan ahead of time. And it makes you look a lot better, in my opinion, to a franchisor too, right? If somebody goes, hey, I've already got this figured out, I'm not worried about money for the first 2 years, right? You're still worried. All of us are going to be worried, right? And as we start businesses, but that's really where we want to be, is in a strong position. And that's what I tell franchisees, right? Is set yourself up to be in that strong position.
I love it, Colin. I love this conversation. I think it's deeply important. And again, I think a buyer might come in thinking they need all the cash in the world to buy a franchise, and there's resources for support like yours. So thank you for the conversation. I really enjoyed it. Anything in closing before we sign off?
Don't be afraid to give us a call. We're more than happy to work with you. We don't charge any upfront fees, so we only charge if you get funded. So it's a great solution for a lot of people to at least be able to explore their options. So give us a call. We're more than happy to work with you.
Love it. For Colin, I'm Nick. This is another episode of Meet the Supplier.